What a joy and privilege it is to be with you today for our daily thought. Today we'll be reviewing Psalm 106 and we'll specifically be talking through verses 25 to 36. Let's read those verses together. They murmured in their tents and did not obey the voice of the Lord. Therefore he raised his hand and swore to them that he would make them fall in the wilderness and would make their offspring fall among the nations, scattering them among the lands. Then they yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor and ate sacrifices offered to the dead. They provoked the Lord to anger with their deeds, and a plague broke out among them. Then Phinehas stood up and intervened, and the plague was stayed. And that was counted to him as righteousness from generation to generation forever. They angered him at the waters of Meribah, and it went ill with Moses on their account. For they made his spirit bitter, and he spoke rashly with his lips. They did not destroy the peoples as the Lord commanded them, but they mixed with the nations and learned to do as they did. They served their idols, which became a snare to them. This passage takes an interesting turn, especially considering that the header of it is "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good." But by the time we start this section of the scripture, we see that the people are losing their way again. They're murmuring in their tents, they're not obeying the voice of the Lord, and what initially seems to be really small, just uttering a complaint or some kind of dissatisfaction with the Lord, very quickly turns into disobedience. And we see from there that their initial complaints turned into compromise as they were associating with people that they were supposed to be set apart from. Eventually, this compromise turns into total conformity to where they mixed with the nations and learned to do as they did in verse 35. It's easy to look at what the people are doing here and say, hey, don't you remember God's past faithfulness? How could you fall into this again? How hard is it to just obey what God has commanded you? But we find ourselves doing this often, don't we? Where we don't purposely set out to drift from the Lord, but we're not rooted enough in the habits that bring us deeper and deeper into his presence. And when we're not, it is very easy to drift. So I have a few questions for you. The first is to consider an area in your life in which you might be taking more of your influence and more of the wisdom of the world versus from the Lord. It might be in your career or in your family life, in your relationships or in your finances. Ask yourself sincerely, where are you putting the influence of the world above the influence of God in your life? Another question that I have for you is to consider what habits of yours make it easier for you to be rooted in God's presence. These could be habits like spending time in the Word, memorizing scripture, praying regularly, fasting regularly, being part of a faith gathering on a regular basis, things like that. And I also want to ask you what habits of yours make it easier for you to drift from God. Be honest as you take inventory of things like your phone use or your finances or your relationships, people that you might be associated with that are not really people who are bringing you closer to God and closer to a relationship with him, but actually pulling you further away from him and from his purposes for you. As you take these reflection questions, I'd also encourage you to consider specific parts of your day, whether it's your morning routines, your evening wind downs, how you handle stressful situations, as well as your tech use, because how we manage and steward all of these things may be a bright indicator of where we are putting our trust and what we are allowing to influence us the most. If it's things of this world, or if we're actually submitting our day, our plans, our actions, our thoughts, and our heart's desires ultimately to the Lord. I know that sometimes it might seem like our things that we have on our mind are either too big for God to care about or do something about, or too small because people have bigger problems. But really, God in his scripture, he calls us so fondly, so often to cast all of our cares upon him because he truly cares for us. Be blessed.